All right, I'm going to get back into some of these chapter summaries. And I don't know how this is going to go. I don't think there's going to be a lot of thematic stuff for this chapter here. This one is, what is it? Chapter 5. So I'm going to skip the first 4 chapters because I've already done kind of that live stream and talked about that and a few things. And it's just about Karsa, so I've talked about him already. And I'll pick up on his stuff later on. So this is starting with Subbook 2. So if you are not at this book, House of Chains, please don't be listening to this, because this is where there's going to be some spoilers. I know some people have watched some of my other just kind of goofy stuff, and I'll try to keep that, I'm surprised people are watching that at all. If they haven't read the books or if they're not at that part yet. But please don't be doing that. Please just wait till you're at the book, okay? But this one was an interesting chapter, and it really threw me for a loop. I forgot how much I had forgotten about Deadhouse Gate, so a lot of this had me going back and kind of cracking that book open again and looking at a couple of my little notes that I had there, and it was a little tricky. It was tricky. So this one will be a little bit of a summary of what I got, what I think was interesting from it, especially this one or a couple pages. But it was interesting. We have the return of Fiddler, who's now Strings, and I think there's something poetic to that. That even though he was Fiddler, this whole person, it seems like he's just broken now. Especially considering how this last book went, or Deadhouse Chains. So he is kind of disbanded from the rest of them, and he's going to join the Malazan ranks again under this new name, Strings. So we get Squint also mentioned, which I think is neat. This guy who was the one who is broken for killing Coltane. I mean, mercy killing, really. Kind of being asked to do that. Still down. We get the commanders. The new commanders that Adjunct Tavor is putting together. These new groups. So these were the guys that really I struggled with. I have sort of a grasp again. But, a lot of this book is kind of a little bit, it's like I'm learning about them all over again in some ways. We have Gamut, who I think was mentioned in the first book when Ganos goes and is with his sisters. I think Gamut is there. So he's, the way I see him, he was kind of like the butler sort of situation or some kind of house manager. And now Adjunct Tavor has hired him to be Fist, right? What's his initial? Yes, Fist. And I think that's interesting because he, it sounds like even though he will be loyal to the Empire, I know in the ancient Rome, when they would have their, these commanders, they would bring people in that would be absolutely loyal to them. And it sounds like that's what Adjunct Tavor is doing there. And I don't know if other people would get much respect or give him much respect, but that's what's happened. We have Lestara Yill of the Red Blades, who really didn't do much for me in the second book, but I am starting to love her. I'm starting to find her very, very interesting. Not so much in this chapter. If you have to know, I'm actually in chapter 9, I believe now. So I'm going to try to catch up maybe right as I'm ending this second sub-book. Really interesting, especially her childhood that we go into. Really kind of brutal, too. We have her being very loyal to the Empire, joining this Red Blades, who were loyal to the Empire. And we have Pearl, who, they were going around in the last book, and and he has been given, she has been kind of given to Pearl as someone to be, how do you say it? They're gonna go off on this special mission, and he's been assigned to her, and that mission is going to be to find Felicen. A very secret mission where it's interesting that even they have all these meetings. They have this meeting with the adjunct, and all of them are there. And then she brings them in, lets them read things, says Lysine is not here in this room. Lets them read these things before burning them. So only they will know about this mission to find Lysine. She kind of asks him if the Talons are still around. She asks Pearl as a way to kind of see, they're officially disbanded as far as I can tell, but they're still out there. And she, man, I have to go back to see. I believe I'm getting this right. You can please help me if I'm wrong. But I believe she wants them to go find Lysine, but also she wants Pearl to go and kind of eliminate the Talon officially, even though she was kind of the one calling the shots with the Talon. Do I have that right? I have that right, correct? And if that's something I'm not supposed to know, then let me know. But I think I got that right. I like it that we have some interesting flashbacks through Gammet's eyes, this guy who worked at House Perrin, and we get the call of nobility. That flashback at the start of that is right before the start of the prologue in Deadhouse Gates. What happened when Bowden, the guy who sawed off that that lady's head with a chain, is assigned to the house a few days before under a different name as this Talon, and Gammet, and is telling Gammet that, Felicen has to go to this Odotarl Mines temporarily. And that's it's just got to happen. So he lets that happen. In the meeting, I think it was interesting. They're talking, Tavor and Gammet and Nock are speaking. They talk about these sunken ships that are happening with Pormqual's treasure. And she, Tavor kind of raises her eyebrow, saying, it's pretty suspicious that there are people getting eaten by sharks, isn't there? So she knows something's up. It sounds like everyone's just dipping. And that happened with Kellenved's ship, Twisted, at the same time, I believe, that all this other stuff was happening, as well as all these other ships kind of just went missing, and everyone thinks they drowned. And I wonder who the heck this guy is, this bone collector guy, and how he fits in. I hope we get to that. And I don't know if that means that the people that all these ships are the ships that are in this Shattered Warren, the Twisted, the Shattered Warren of Shadow that we keep going to over and over. But it's interesting, isn't it? Let's see. I want to go to actually page 296 and talk about this, how the Empire was formed a little bit. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's really interesting. Kellenved began with one companion, Dancer, who we find is Cotillion. And holy smokes, am I ever interested in Cotillion. The more this goes on. I'll talk about him more in the next chapter when we get to Crocus, and when we get to who else did he just kind of bring on? Dang it, I can't remember. But we'll get to that in the next chapter. Really cool part. So he started with him, a handful of locals in Malaz City, and set about conquering the criminal element. And then there were some hirelings, which one of them was Nock, right? And Amaran and Dujek a woman named Hall, and they started kind of expanding their influence. And it's interesting because we find out, and I think we already knew this before, but going into Dead House, they found entrance into to get to Dead House, gave them this special kind of change within them. I think longevity, immunity, kind of this step below ascendancy, kind of what Gessler and Stormy have, right? So that's very, very cool. We have people, the Nappans, these refugees, the Crust brothers, Urko, and then Surly, Lacine. So it's all part of this early part of the empire. Talk the Elders there, Dasim Ultor. We have Taishren and Duker, I guess. Let's see. And then we're on to page 297. I'll just go through this quick. Very interesting. The Nappans were this group that Surly was a part of, the Lacine later on. The Nappans were among us were far more than simple refugees. Surly was of a royal line. Theirs was a singular purpose, and I'm reading this, to crush the Unten hegemony. I never say that word right. And they planned on using Kellenved to achieve that. So they have this other goal to crush this. And it's interesting because in this book, more than the other ones, I feel like, or I'm just finally grasping that, it's so interesting that there's this core of people. Think of the Teblor people branched off. We get the Tist people, kind of, there's a murky kind of history there. I finally got to the third Tist people, by the way, just yesterday. But there's this hatred among people that have branched off. We have in the second book, you know, the moment at the river crossing when they lift up all those people from the dead, and then the tribes warred over each other. It's interesting that sometimes the people that we hate the most, and this is found in our own history, are the people that branched off, that were once ours, once of us. Now, this isn't, since I like Roman history, and we have the Jewish people who were all over the kingdom, by the time Christians showed up. And man, did that piss off the Jewish people, this branching off, because it was like to them, they saw it as kind of a bastardization of their belief system, right? So we get that as well in here, and we get that with a lot of our history. And it's just interesting that it's really, really showcased in this book, where, it's just very interesting, where these light Tist, what are they? The ones with the L's, the light ones, hate the dark ones, because the dark ones more kind of are about this Mother Dark, and the light ones are more about this Father Light. And then the Tist Edur are just kind of in the middle. And I really love this theme. And it's interesting because then we have Karsa as the one who is hopefully going to bring them together. And it's also interesting because we have Lacine and the adjunct, Tavor, who are of the same family. And it's like they're on this collision course. It's just so awesome how there will be similar things being kind of expressed, but from different angles. And I just love that. And I've really loved this book so far. It has been a little bit slower to me in some ways. Not every scene is as exciting as the last book, but I really like it. I really like it. So let's get back to this with Kellanved. Sorry, that was a. We have the first betrayal. Let me see. Right. So they have, even though they're part of Kellanved's group, they have this other sort of kind of thing that's happening. Surly's assassination of Kellanved and Dancer, according to them, shattered, the people that are talking, shattered that family irrevocably. But that is precisely what where my understanding falters. It doesn't make sense to these guys. And it's interesting because it was only the Nappans who deserted the new empress, this person who she was a part of. And we get sort of an explanation of that, since they were a part of her group and she did this, it would look disfavorably upon them and this scheme they were on. So she kind of shamed them for doing what she did. And they didn't want to associate with her anymore. She had the claw, says this was all that she needed. And the talons during all this, where was it? Someone asks, Gamut asks, where were the talons during all this? And the Admiral continues, I am afraid I have no answer to that. I was not in Malaz City. The talons essentially vanished with Dancer's death. And holy smokes, I will get to that later, but Dancer, his name, holy smokes, there's just so much that is found so early on in these books. I cannot wait to do a reread. But his name, and we get to the shadows and stuff, and this Lestar Yale, that chapter. I'll talk more about that. But holy smokes, I really, really have loved this sub book quite a lot. Let's see. So we can end that part there. We end with Fiddler, now Strings, kind of hooking up with some people. They think he's a deserter at first, and hooking up with this OG guy who he thought was dead, who gave these bridge burners their names. Gessler, or most of them their names, Gessler and Stormy. I might have said Stawny earlier. I meant Stormy. They are there with their super awesome kind of metal fire-imbued skin that makes them kind of go towards ascendancy. I don't understand all of why that happened, if they were in Deadhouse Gates or what kind of happened. I really need to brush up on what happened with them because, like I said earlier in different videos, man, Deadhouse Gates, I kind of flew through it. I really enjoyed it, but I am very, very, very shaky on the details. So if anybody wanted to even point me in the right direction, I don't especially want to go to a wiki for that. I'd love to go back to the Deadhouse books or point me in the right direction of what to read again. If there was someone who would do that. But, I'd love to know more about these guys because I found it really, really interesting. But it's just, how the heck did they get this skin? I can't recall why. And then they kind of recognize Fiddler for who he is. And then they're going to go and swap some stories, both saying that they will have better stories than the other person. Really cool. That chapter took me a while to get through, but having some hindsight with what I've read now, I'm a few chapters ahead, and now looking at it, it doesn't seem so bad. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things because I want to be clear going forward. Please don't spoil anything. But really, really interesting, and I'll see you on the next one. Maybe I'll try to get a couple chapters in, but we'll see. I can't really remember what is in the next chapter or two, so I'll have to go and, review that. So, again, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.